Hi, everyone. This is Trish Kendall, your host for the Choose and Become interview series. I made 5 critical choices on my journey to enduring success. I picked up the phone. I committed to a two-way agreement. I built trust in myself and I inspired the trust of others. I created community and belonging. And finally, I embrace my boundless capacity to give love and to receive love. In this interview series, my guests, people who I admire, share a little bit of their insights and wisdom as it relates to these 5 choices across their lives. And so today, Imran, I'm so honored to have you. Today I have Imran Qureshi, the head of North America for WTW. Imran, thank you. Thank you. Will you just start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. And Trish, thank you for having me. It's just a pleasure to be part of this. And also we've known each other for a long time, so it's great that we've most recently reconnected as well. So a little bit about me. Tell from the accent, while I'm based in Chicago, I'm not a native Chicagoan. I was born and raised in the United Kingdom. And my mother is from Trinidad in the West Indies. My father migrated from India in 1948 when the country split to Pakistan. But he made his way to Britain in the 60s and he met my mother there. And I was first to go to college and embarked upon a career in the actuarial field and then moved across to the United States in 97. So the immigrant experience has actually been not only part of who I am today, but is part of my parents as well. And that seems to have been just a quite a defining part of my past. But yes, I'm thrilled to be here.
It's great. And you said it, we've known each other for a while. You have been an example to me, both professionally and personally, about just what it means to create success in your life. Will you share with us what does enduring success mean to you?
So yeah, as I've reflected on that over the last few years, I want to maybe share a story that really led me to realize the essence of that question. So I was having dinner with a friend, and he asked me a question at dinner that I really did not know how to answer. He asked me, "Why do you do what you do?" And as I contemplated the response, he provided his view around why he does what he does. And it really was a broad statement around the impact he was seeking to make on the world. And as I reflected on it, I really didn't have a sense of my why. And I felt somewhat inadequate in some respects. And it was a very jarring moment as I introspectively spent time over the year thinking about that why. And as I crystallized it, it really wasn't about what I was doing, but it was about how I was doing it. And so I crystallized it as to unlock and unleash the power and potential in others so that they can realize their own purpose. And I actually iterated on that a few years ago and appended something to that, which was while experiencing moments of joy along the way. And so for me, that encapsulates what enduring success is. When I lean into that, when I live that purpose, that's when I feel like I'm being personally successful. When I stray from that, that feels like I detract from that success. So it becomes my anchor point as I try and navigate life.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we reconnected, so we had gone a while, maybe 7 or 8 years, because as we say, life gets in the way, which I, of
Right.
course, corrected that. But when we reconnected a few years ago, I remember distinctly you sharing that purpose with me and the joy edition, which I just thought just hit me hard. So thank you. When I was in my early 20s, I made a first choice that changed the trajectory of my life. And my first choice was to pick up the phone. Now, since then, I've made other first choices. And I'm curious, what is a first choice that you've made when you reflect back, you know, has impacted your enduring success?
So choices, in my view, are both conscious and subconscious. So when I chose to leave the United Kingdom to come to live in the United States in 97, in many respects, as I mentioned previously, I was following what my parents did. They left their countries of birth and their families to chart a new life in Britain. They sought economic prosperity and career growth, and I did the same. And so, to some extent, I reflect on whether that was a subconscious decision. As I look at a more conscious decision, I think coming back to my purpose, I would say my first conscious choice of magnitude was to lean into living my purpose. So I got involved with organizations such as the Posse Foundation, which is this amazing organization, and started to get more involved in impacting students in high schools and getting them to college and to be successful there. I started teaching high school kids. I actually taught a class on the 7 habits of highly effective teens,
Ah,
which was really just fulfilling, and being able to engage with teens around a subject matter that isn't taught in classes, but it is about trying to realize your own purpose. I was involved in impacting diversity, equity, inclusion on a school board, but I think one of the most intentional things I've done is being very conscious about my interactions with others. And look, I'm not perfect at this, but I strive to have meaningful, substantive interactions, and that's a choice, right? That's an intentional choice. So I would say that the overarching frame here is being conscious about living my purpose as being a choice.
and you are so intentional with your interactions. Every time we interact, and I even observe you with others and your interactions with them and some
Mm.
of our mutual friends and peers. The second choice that I made was to commit to a two-way agreement. And that two-way agreement was between me and my sister. And I experienced the force of a two-way agreement. And for me, it really transformed the feeling of doing this out of duty and obligation to doing something out of joy and desire. You and I have talked about two-way agreements. What's a two-way agreement that you have committed to?
So this was, I mean, by the way, these questions are incredibly impactful. They're not easy to answer. You need to really dissect and reflect and be introspective around them. So I just credit you with just even framing the question in the way
Oh,
that you have done. So the way I think about commitment and these two-way agreements, I think there are certain things that we do that we feel like we have to do. So I think about, I have to exercise, I have to eat better, I have to sleep better. I mean, even my purpose, I have to live about that, live my purpose. But it is about a higher level of delayed and deeper sense of happiness. It's not an immediate payoff. So this idea that we do things when we want to do them, we're not necessarily getting immediate gratification. There was this Stanford professor, actually a psychologist, in 1972 did the marshmallow test, which was an experiment on delayed gratification. It was in the 1970s, and in this study, a child was offered a choice between one small but immediate reward or two small rewards if they waited for a period of time. And during this time, the researcher left the room for 15 minutes and then returned. The reward was either a marshmallow or a pretzel stick, depending on the child's preference. In follow-up studies, the researchers found that children who were able to wait longer for preferred rewards tended to have better life outcomes. And Carol Dweck, who wrote The Growth Mindset, she also picked up on that same idea, that there's this idea of delayed gratification. So as I think about the idea of a two-way agreement and this shift from I have to I want to me, you're setting up an agreement that with yourself that you are not seeking immediate return, immediate gratification. You recognize that what you're doing through a conscious choice is going to lead to longer term, sustainable, more positive outcomes that provide a deeper sense of gratification. And to me, that all links back to purpose and what I'm trying to do.
Totally. And you said it. I mean, even I would say probably especially committing to a two-way agreement with yourself
Yeah.
is not always easy. And in fact, it's probably really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
To
It
do
is.
it.
It is. It is. And I think it's you're constantly resetting, right? You sort of, it's never a linear projection around just this idea of just enduring success. It's a reset. So you go like this, you may dip, and then you hit the reset button, you go back up.
Yes.
And you know what helps with that, hitting that reset button? Surround yourself with people that can help you hit that reset button. And so, yeah, even my interactions with you, Trish, and the conversations we're having, it helps me do that. And then that helps me then reestablish that two-way commitment, that two-way agreement with myself to be able to then continue on that trajectory.
That's awesome. And continue to stay grounded in your purpose.
Right.
Because you energize yourself and then you continue to move forward and you continue
Right.
to inspire and motivate others. And it's a cycle.
Hmm.
I struggled very much for all the reasons this community knows around trust. Trust was not just a foreign concept to me, but it just, I learned to not trust. And so the third deliberate choice I made was to build trust in myself. And then that led to learning how to inspire the trust of others. Was there ever a time you needed to build trust in yourself? And if so, how did you do it?
Um, uh, yeah, as I reflected on this, I think self-doubt
Hmm.
has always been an important prerequisite for growth for me. So, when you can overcome self-doubt and when you can gain the ability to trust yourself, you gain confidence. So, and I've experienced that in every new role I've taken, any new endeavor I've experienced, and I've come to accept it and lean into it. So when I don't trust myself, when I experience self-doubt, to me it's like that's great, because that is part of growth. And I know from a year from that point, I will have gained the confidence in myself and built trust in myself that I'll be stronger for it. But the idea of trusting myself as well does mean that I have to take risks. I think there's a piece to that, and it's all around growth. And I remember coming across an individual, this is quite a few years ago, who talked about the idea, if you don't make a decision within the first 5 seconds of thinking about it, then your brain will talk you out of it. And it could be really simple, right? It could be saying something in a meeting or expressing a view that is contrarian. And what this individual said was that what will help is neurologically is that you don't just say it within 5 seconds, you accompany it with movement.
Ooh.
And by the way, I'm very gesticular, right? I think it's my Trinidadian mother and her roots. So I tend to use my hands a lot. But by doing that, by accompanying a thought within the first 5 seconds, you take a risk. And when you start to take more risks, you start to build more trust in yourself and you gain confidence in yourself. So it's that sort of that that's something I try to do, is to lean into that. And it's, it's, again, it's a work in progress. It's always like trying to think about how, knowing that trust is something that you have to build. So you look for these techniques in which to do it, but you also don't get discouraged the fact that you don't have trust in yourself, or you are or you lack a certain confidence in yourself, because that's just part of growth. So just accept it, and then learn from it and grow from it.
Ah, this is one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on, because you are Imran, head of North America for WTW, and all the other things that you do for the community and all the things that you do around you. And just for others to hear you say you struggle with self-doubt and you choose to take a risk, to take action, I just think it's powerful. And we're both parents. I think about that with our kids, with our children, and I know you've been such an example to both of your kids too.
Do you know, my I said to my kids, this was quite a few years ago when they were young and they're playing sports or whatever they do. My both kids played chess, for example, and or whether they're trying to do an exam at school. And I'd say to them, you're going to experience self-doubt, you'll experience nervousness, but channel that, and recognize that's just an important actual energy that you experience, and you can use that energy. And my daughter still reflects on that today in everything she does. She will say that very point, that she knows that when she's experiencing it, but she uses it to her advantage and channels it. And I think that's an important part in building trust in yourself.
Now, so this is building trust in yourself. How do you inspire the trust of others?
So to me, it has to be grounded in authenticity and a set of values that you stay anchored to. And so when you're able to articulate positions without agendas, when you're able to be mindful through your interactions with others, when you engage in authentic conversations and substantive ones, then I think you build a level of trust with others, because then they feel less vulnerable to be able to engage with me. And so I hold that trust dearly, right? And then, but to me, it is about being authentic. The other thing that fuels me around authenticity is curiosity. So I like to learn about people, learn about their perspectives, and I look for connection points through that learning. So when I'm engaging in dialogue, and I met somebody over the weekend, we went to a Chicago Fire game. And it was the most. It was, the whole weather was horrible, but we're at this game, and I met somebody, and random. I was there with my daughter, and we got into this discussion and dialogue. What do you do? What do I do? And we started talking, and I was curious. I was asking questions. Where are you from? And this person was actually born in Trinidad. Who would have thought it? And we started then engaging in this just wonderful conversation about food, because that's a connection point, right? So then and I was genuinely curious, and through that curiosity came authenticity, and I think a level of interaction that was real. And I walked away from that saying that was a really impactful human experience. And so I guess that's a long-winded way of saying that's what I built first.
It's fabulous. And curiosity and care. If you're curious and you care enough to learn about the other person, oh my gosh, and this manifests across all of our lives, in our professional roles, inspiring trust with clients, inspiring trust with our children, inspiring trust with our community. The fourth choice I made, because this rolls right in there, is to create community and belonging. When I was in my 30s, I had created more professional success than I ever thought imaginable. I was like, whoa. But when I looked around, I realized that I was friendly with everyone. I was friends with no one. I didn't belong, and I wanted to. Was there ever a time that you felt like you didn't belong?
Well, yes. So growing up in Britain in the 70s and 80s, in a society that was still, relatively segregated to some extent, where you weren't considered British unless you were, frankly, white.
Mm.
And so my father being from Pakistan, my mother from Trinidad, um, living in Britain, raising me, you had all kinds of dynamics going on there. So you had the dynamic of not being considered British. I also had the additional dynamic of not necessarily fitting in with either the Pakistani community, because I didn't speak Urdu, which is the language of Pakistan, or the Trinidadian community. So I was sort of in this area of not really belonging to any community. And and it's something I've been very cognizant of growing up. And then when I came to the United States as well, which is a melting pot, you meet people from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of different various ethnic backgrounds that have intermingled, and so you gravitate to people that have similar dispositions, and so there's almost like communities that you build with individuals that either that have just different diverse experiences. There's this great movie. It was a few years ago. It's called Blinded by the Light, and it's about a kid in Britain of Pakistani parents growing up in Britain, born in Britain, and who becomes obsessed with Bruce Springsteen. That's not me, by the way. I wasn't obsessed with Bruce
No,
Springsteen,
you're
but
a big Beatles fan.
Beatles. That's thank my parents for that. The
Yes, right.
Beatles were a big band when they first came to the UK. But this movie was about this kid and this um, juxtaposition of not being white but growing up in Britain, and yet having a parents with traditional backgrounds, and that tension, and it's about that experience, but it's also about Britain at that time, which was, you saw in this movie what it was like, and it was challenging, and I remember experiences like that growing up. So that builds resilience, but it also builds this recognition that you may not necessarily fit into a neat little category or a neat little community, but that's okay, because there are others that feel exactly the same, and so you tend to find them, and then you create community in that way.
So you gave us both sides, not belonging and belonging. What does it feel like not to belong? What are some of the adjectives? Like, what does it feel like
Hmm.
not to belong?
It's a good question. I think it feels like um, you feel disconnected. Um, there could be a sense of um, uneasiness, of frustration, of lack of confidence in yourself. Um, and I said, remember the earlier part of the conversation that we talked about how we need to surround ourselves with people that can help you hit the reset button. And when you don't have that community around you, you don't have that ability to do that as easily.
Mhm.
So it can feel lonely. That's probably a good way of describing it, right? This sense of loneliness. Um, And so I think it is important to feel a sense of belonging, and whether that be belonging in the community in which I referred to, you can feel belonging with the people you work with. You can feel belonging with your family. You can feel a sense of belonging in just many different contexts. But you have to be intentional about that, right? You have to be cognizant of that, because when you're cognizant of it, I I think you start to feel that sense of belonging because you've intentionally leaned into those respective communities. And I think there are multiple communities, right? And I just listed off a number there. It's not just one community. There are communities, and sometimes the circles of those communities may never intersect. But
Totally.
that's okay because they each represent a different facet of your life. And then you just got to lean into that.
One of the things that I've been trying to be more intentional about, I'll just throw this out there for a second, is trying to find the times to cross pollinate. If that's the right, the different communities. And, maybe there is, a couple of my neighbor friends that I'm able to invite to, I'm just going to say my church community, for Christmas or whatever, something like that. That's a simple example. But trying to be intentional about interacting these communities to elevate their sense of belonging and community that, so it's just something that I try to reflect on. I'm not always great at it. I try to do it.
But it also, what sparked the thought there when you mentioned that was when you do that, when you bring individuals from outside, from multiple communities, you're enriching the experiences of those interactions because they're inherently diverse.
Yes.
So those individuals who may associate with more individuals like them are now being mixed with or being exposed to other communities, and that just enriches the overall community. That is the very definition of diversity.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, in my experience, when I deliberately created my first community, the Marathon Girls, which you know about, when I deliberately created my first community and that sense of belonging, what I learned is that I get by giving. I could only get community by giving, by giving myself. So do you have an example or just a thought on a time that you got by giving?
Yeah, I think to me, one of the most important things to give is time. And time, the way I sort of frame this, time is the most important currency. And when I give that and intentionally give that to others, that's how you build meaningful relationships. And it's something that I've tried to do or be more conscious of. And it is about investing time to build relationship capital, right? Because when you do that, when you build up that bank with others, you also have the opportunity to draw from it as well when you need it. And it isn't just about giving time because you'll receive an outcome. It is about, because that just may continue to grow and grow and you may never need it. And that's okay because it's actually giving time to somebody else. So they're enriching their own sense of who they are. But to me, it's time. And so that then means that you have to be cognizant of what do you not do to gain time. And that's hard, right? We said it, you said it earlier at the outset, right? Life gets in the way. And then, but you intentionally reached out to me and gave me your time and I gave my time and we connected, right? Or reconnected. So to me, that's the fundamental currency is time. And we have to create more of it and we have to give more of it. And when we do it, that's when we're able to build meaningful, sustainable relationships.
A wise person said to me one time that we can't make time, we can make choices. And that is, to me, you're just saying it's intentional, it's a choice. And, I wish my superpower was that I didn't have to sleep because then I wouldn't have to worry about time. I'd have 24 hours of the day to do so much more. But unfortunately, at 9 o'clock, I'm like, I'm done. I'm spent. So these 4 choices that we just explored, and thank you for exploring them with me. Each of these 4 choices led me to my 5th choice. So picking up the phone, creating or committing to a 2-way agreement, building trust and creating community prepared me for my fifth choice, which was to embrace my boundless capacity to give love and to receive love. And for me, that was the hardest choice. And so these other four prepared me for that. So I want to get into this a little bit with you. And first, a distinction that I want to make is love as an emotion, which isn't a choice, and love as an action, which is the choice of giving it and we're receiving it. And we've had this conversation. Will you just start us out with what does it feel like when you choose to give your love, to give all of your love, and you choose to receive love in return?
It feels great. And it feels like you feel this deeper level of satisfaction, this deeper level of happiness. But it also begs the question, and you and I talked about that, right? If it feels great when we do it, why do we sometimes withhold love?
Yeah.
So I've sort of reflected on that a little bit, and I think I could crystallize it in one word, which is vulnerability. And so unrequited love implies that you want something in return, and if you fear not receiving it, then you may not give it. And unconditional love is about doing something without expectation. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're aware of that, but Maslow also said this. He supported the unconditional love perspective by saying that in order to grow, an individual has to have a positive perspective of themselves. And when you're able to do that, you can give unconditional love without that vulnerability. And so, if I crystallize all of that, right, into just saying it doesn't need to be big. It's your everyday interactions that demonstrate that. It's those small acts, those small examples. And as I thought about that, to me, it's also that definition of integrity. So it was C.S. Lewis who said that integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And to me, that's an example of boundless love. It's advocating for someone when they're not in the room. It's lifting someone up when they don't even realize it. It's having intentional conversations about somebody in a positive context, and they may never hear you utter those words directly to them. And that's an act and a choice that you're making to give love without an expectation that you'll receive something in return. And those are the small examples that I think represent, I think what you're saying. And they don't need to necessarily be big and grandiose, but they have to be intentional and they have to be an act, as you said.
Yes. Oh my God. And even like the small things obviously just hit me. Boom. I'm hit with that because it is so often, if I'm getting in this conversation with multiple people, that sometimes it seems so big and it's really not if we make those small intentional choices. And so that hits me. It feels great to give love and to receive love. And there's so many reasons. I think you nailed the one that I've always dealt with, which is vulnerability. So many reasons why we as a world don't choose to do it every day, with every interaction, with each person that we interact with. But what if we did?
Yeah, I mean, that question is so profound always, but it feels particularly profound today as we look at news on our TVs and radios and social media, and it feels like if we were to experience what you just described, the world would be a better place. So how do we do that? We start with our interactions day to day, and we try and make some modicum of impact on the world by being intentional about all the things that we just talked about.
Imran, Oh, so I will close us with I believe with my whole heart that when we choose to give love and we choose to receive love, like you and I are doing right now, that creates enduring success and fuels the success of those around us. And I thank you for just automatically saying yes to join me today and giving me your love. And I for sure am receiving it wholeheartedly.
Well, well, thank you. And yeah, I don't know what made me say yes immediately without really thinking about it. But as I reflect on it, it's because of you. It's who you are and your authenticity and your ability to engender that in others. I think was probably the reason why I said yes. So thank you.
Thank you. I can't wait to share this with everyone. So go on with your day. Thank you, Imran, so much, and I will see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Trish.
Thank you for joining me for our Choose and Become interview series. You could find this episode and others at trishkendall.com. Just go to trishkendall.com/choose-become-interview-series. Or if you have a question or just want to leave a comment, email me, trish@trishkendall.com.